The recording is about to start. Give it a second. Okay, so this session, once again, this session is being recorded. And if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And once again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining another session of Azure Power Lunch. Today's topic is effectively troubleshoot your Azure function. So how you do it? Okay, just a quick background. Um, I was working with some customer problems, and we were like looking at Azure Functions, and I kind of was, and I'm not very good at troubleshooting things, so I kind of stumble across some of the stuff that is already there, some of the things that are already there as a part of Azure Function, and that should really help you um, kind of uh, resolve issue and find things before you start kind of start to pulling your hair out. So these are some of the things that can definitely help you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to quick take 1 minute on Azure Function, what are different key pieces and what you need to look at. Then we will start looking at what are the quick hits, how you can quickly see some of the things which are there on the function portal page, you know, and they're just there, and new things have been added, so you can quickly take a look and see what's going on there, to diagnose some common issues. And then we will take a deeper look, or kind of go a little bit deep with App Insights, what App Insights can do for you. And we will look at some of the simple queries. And by the way, there is no limit with App Insights because it's now integrated with Azure Monitor. So you can do custom queries and all that, all you want. And for further, but we will look at for deeper information or more detail, but we're going to look at some of the key queries, see what's out there. Okay. And just want to give a heads up, this is not a session on KQL or custom query language, but we will look at some of those things. Um, with that, mostly I have a few slides um, that I have for reference, but mostly we are going to be just going through the portal. So first of all, let's be very clear. When we are talking about function, we are talking about Azure Function Service. It has three parts to it. One is the um, events, which kind of or triggers, which invoke the function. That can be HTTP. You may be calling the function over HTTP. Can be timer. It can be a file being dropped in a storage account. It can be a message dropping in a queue or anything that is required um, to have for the function execution. And that's how it will execute. This will trigger the execution of the function. Then you have the code, okay, which is running the actual logic of the function, what you want to do when this happens. So uh, that will do it, and you can do it in any language: C sharp, Java, Python, etc. Okay, or Node.js. Um, and then you have the outputs, and these are the output binding. So triggers are the input binding, outputs are the output binding, and all of these things are important when you are troubleshooting a function, because these are the points. There may be an issue with the input trigger. Okay, there may be an issue or binding. I mean, maybe have connection string wrong. That's most commonly the cause, or you are picking the wrong connection string variable, or that variable it was in your file when you were developing on prem, but it never made um, into the configuration of the function. Okay, that's that. On the other hand, your code, that's most of the time we have issue. I mean, you may have debugged it, but on-prem, or maybe you're like me, you only debug in production. So in that scenario, I mean, there may be some kind of issues with the code, and then it may be an issue with the output binding. You know, maybe the output. Um, service is not reachable, you know, or once again, the connection string may be bad, or maybe you are not pointing to the right folder. If it's, let's say, you're writing to a storage account. So all of these things you have to kind of, things that can go wrong with that, with the function itself. So it's important to know what are the key components of the function as a whole. Okay. With that, let's talk about the, the platform that Azure Function is running on. So you have, first of all, the host instance. Host instance is where your function is running. Okay. And this is important to know that as if you are using premium or consumption functions, the auto scaling is the default. So what will happen is as you throw load at the function, it's going to scale up and it's going to start adding host instances to it. So it's important to note when you are doing a kind of in-depth overview of the function, or kind of a doing in-depth diagnostics, you should know like how many instances were running, how my requests were distributed, and things like that. Okay, so these are some of the things which will come into play. Okay, so with that, any questions at the moment? Okay, so let's quickly jump into the demo. Okay, and I want to take you to this function. This is the function app01. And let's see how many functions there are. There are 3 functions here. So this is the function app. There are 3 functions. And let me see. Yeah, hopefully everybody can see my screen. So first of all, this is the overview screen. That tells you how your function, how many, kind of a general information about your function. Doesn't help you in regards to debug it, but if you see a dreaded runtime not available and your memory working set is 0, then you know that there is a problem with your function. I mean, obviously, let's say you're trying to hit the function, it's timing out. You come here, you see the memory working set to 0, and um, an error here saying that on the top that runtime is not available, then there's definitely something wrong with the function. Okay, so with that, let's start with the journal stuff, which is diagnose and solve problem. So there are 2 tabs to it. One deals with availability and performance. This is kind of you know if you are getting any kind of a CPU memory overloads, or your app is not performing that fast, that's what it is. The second one is more about um, are other people able to access your app, you know, or how it is scaling. Is the scaling working and things like that? And let's look at both of these for a just for a quick overview. So the thing is, not everything will apply to you, but this just look at an overview. It says for the last 1 hour, it has been online. There are 3 function, disabled function. So you know it just gives you the information like what's going on with the function, and if there are any failures, you will see the functions over here. Okay, and that's where I want to kind of share a very important point about functions. I didn't know it kind of a few weeks back, but I'm sure how many other people know about it. But when we say failure of a function, it's not the HTTP code. So let's say that you have a function, it has an HTTP trigger, request response, and you are returning a 500 response from that function. Okay, it will not mark that function a failure. This is very important. And this I kind of find the hard way. I'm not ashamed of admitting that. But what I'm saying is that is not a function failure. Your function in the case of your application may have failed. It may have returned a 500 response, and that is not right for you. But in the case of Azure function, it is not regarded as failure because the function respond as designed. It was supposed to send an HTTP response, and it sent in a HTTP response. It is considered a failure if if it could not deliver, it crashed. Okay, and it did not. So let's say the function, something happened, the function crashed, or something happened. Let's say that it tried to send, it was outbound, trigger was outbounding, the output binding was a service bus, and it could not connect to the service bus, or something happened, that will be considered a failure. But as long as sending a response back, if doesn't matter if that response was error, then it's your application that is sending that response. You may have caught an exception and sent it back. That is still considered a success. So that's a key point to remember as we are working with these Azure functions. Okay. Any questions?
Do you want to take a question on scaling more of, if maybe you want to delay it, or let me read the question first.
Yeah, please.
When more requests are coming to a function, would there be an issue with warming up the function instance for each instantiation? In that case, is it good to create function in the app service plan?
Yeah. So basically, here's the thing, man. That depends on your need. And scaling is a separate topic. Probably we will cover in another session, and maybe we need to do it. But right now, you don't control the scaling out of a premium function. We are talking more in the context of premium function. If we are talking about that, you don't control the scale out. You can control the limit. So if this function is a Linux premium function, can have maximum of 20 instances. Minimum instance count will never be less than always ready instance. And just remember, if you have always ready instances, you are paying for that. Okay. And then there is a warm instance, and there is, by default, the limit is one. So let's say that you have three instances always ready. There's one warm instances. As you hit the first one, the warm instance start up, and you start paying for it. And you can increase that limit, but at the moment, the only way to do it, I think, is through CLI. Okay, so that's something just to keep in mind. Okay, and so that's that. And by the way, we will probably cover it in a separate session, but I just want to mention it since this question has come up. I hope that answered your question.
Good, thank you.
So let's go back to the our diagnostics. So we saw this is the general information here. Application changes, the first tab. This is currently in public preview, but the thing is, it public preview means they're still kind of you know uh, finalizing a feature set and all that. But I think it's very useful because I mean 90% of the bugs that I have seen are because of some config changes which are done manually, not through DevOps, or without kind of or maybe some mistake there. So it will tell you all the config changes that may have happened to the app. Okay, and it will be if you have redeployed the app, it will be if there are config changes in the um, what we call, if there are config changes in the app config file, all of these changes will show up here. For example, I increase the minimum instance count to 3. As you can see, that tells you that I have increased the minimum instance count to 3. I have used to have an IP restriction on it. I removed that. That's showing up here. So that's very helpful as you are diagnosing these issues in regards to the app service. This is kind of, oh yeah, wow, man, I did not know who made this change. you know and once again, this is another one, and that will tell you what different things have changed. So there is an entire list, um, where you can see what things were there and what things, kind of have updated and all that. So all of these things, kind of, play a role as you are, uh, playing with the kind of, up, trying to figure out what issue may have happened. Okay. So let's go back here. Then we have application insights logging. We will take a look at that in detail. Application logs. Okay. By default, it does not store application logs, which is kind of a log, certain logs like how your application started, all of that. You have to go into your app and turn on application logging to make sure that you are storing the application log. Okay, so that's important. Um, then we have, if you are using blob triggers, make sure that in your configuration file you set max degree of parallelism, which is how many simultaneous blob triggers it can receive. So if there are a lot of blobs coming in, how many blob triggers your application will be able to receive, and that will be depend on, I mean, I think the maximum is 8. Okay, by default, I think is one or 4 or 1, I don't remember. But that thing you have to set it up just to make sure if there are a lot of files are being updated and you want to get notification and you don't want them to queued up, then you may have to set this up. Of course, then there is this container crash. I don't think it's going to be um, applicable if you are running. In the case of Windows, it may not be applicable, but in case of Linux, everything in Linux run as a container in Azure App Service. So that will, you have to take a look at it. If there are any crashes or any issues, that can give you a clue of what may be wrong with your application. And same, sorry, I did miss one container issue. This is the full Docker log, you know, and can be found here. So all the Docker logs can be found here. So that's will give you all the Docker logs of how your site is working. So these are all the Docker logs, how it started. These are all the paths. So you can look at it and find out if there are any issues. And this is just available as a part of your app. So you don't have to kind of go anywhere and read 10,000 document to do it. This is all a part of it. And while we are talking about it, I will highly recommend making like a flight checklist or similar to flight checklist, like when a pilot in airlines kind of troubleshoot an issue, they always have a checklist. And no matter how sure they are about that cannot be an issue, they always go through each item one by one and verify it, you know, um, just to make sure that they don't overlook anything. So when you are troubleshooting, that is a good idea to kind of make a checklist of things for your application. But like if your application is relying on databases and different things, that's where, especially with Azure Function, like, okay, is my configuration is good? Is my containers are up? Am I seeing any configuration issue on all those things? So check them one by one to make sure you don't miss anything. Okay. Okay. So this is so if your app is hitting these errors, so it is telling you what to consider. So it's saying, I don't. This app is not. Yeah, go ahead, please. Any questions? So that's that. And you can basically look at these checks. So this, once again, and the beauty of this thing is It's providing you all the queries that you need. Look here, all the exceptions, things like that, that so you don't have to kind of dig through, okay, how do I find that? I mean, you can take these queries and then find out kind of initial information, and then you can go for more deeper diagnostics. So all of that information is right on your fingertips. Okay. So the both of these properties are set. This is basically, and this is what I was talking about. It's set to 1. You can increase it, but remember, pre-warm instances, you will have to pay for that. So that's something that you have to keep in mind in terms of the cost performance. Okay, we are doing a little bit slow on time. So this tells you what were the running functions, what was the latency, how many were total executions, and things like that. All of that, this is all of that information is available. You don't have to run any queries to do that, and all executions and errors. There were no errors because every time, yes, it did return the response other than 500, but at the same time, it did not fail any binding. Okay, and you can use custom ranges as well. Just keep in mind functions that are not triggered. That tells you how many running instances. And all of that information. So all of this information is here. That's only one part of it. I I, I don't want to go every one of them because we will run out of our allocated 30 minutes. On the other hand, let's go to the configuration and management. And that's where a few of the things I want you to look at, which is which client IP got rejected. Okay, so um, we have a number of times when working with customers, okay, this function is not responding, or this app is calling this function. It was working before, it is not working. That can tell you, and that's an external application, and they have given us their IP, and we have whitelisted that or unblocked it, all of that. When you look at that, this will tell you which IPs are blocked. And this is very important. I mean, when you're debugging, it may not be a big deal, but when you are running in production, this can be a key thing where you can say, okay, we are blocking this IP address. Oh, yeah, that's another IP address that we use. So, yeah, please, we forgot to give it to you, you know, and that's where kind of this thing comes into picture. So, as you can see here, this is the IP address that is block and how many requests that is blocked. So it will have a list of IPs. If more IPs are blocked, which are trying to get your access to your app service, and those may be legitimate IP, you may have to unblock them and things like that. So that's one of the key thing. Okay. Second part is if you are using any keyword references, this will tell you what is wrong with your keyword references. If you are accessing keyword on a private endpoint, or if it's unable to access the keyword references because it cannot get to the keyword, or if it got to the keyword but it didn't have the right access, all of that information would be there. Okay, so I mean, just right there. You don't have to do anything. It's all that information. It's kind of it's giving you that. So these are some of the function key changes. If you have changed them or not. Function app settings, check if there is anything wrong. Any app setting this is misconfigured. What are the scaling operation? This is once again very important. Um, so you you know um, basically we haven't set up any since it's a premium function, we are not setting any profiles up, but it will tell you how many um, you know uh, current instances that is running, and things like that. So these are some of the things which are right there on your kind of a fingertips that you can use to get access to information regarding how to debug it. One other thing, so I just want to mention one query to you, which is this one. So let's go to App Insights. I know we already have like 26 minutes. Man, really bad at managing time. Okay, so let me go in here. App Insights. Please use App Insights. That will make your life very easy when you are kind of troubleshooting issues. I think everybody is familiar with, should be familiar with things like application map, live matrix. This is when you are running your function live, it will tell you how many instances, how many servers are online, how many requests are coming in, things like that. Currently, there are 4 servers online. As you can see, these are the instances. You can search transactions here, find out with just key, some key value. But the gold is here in logs. That's where your problem that you have been scratching your head for maybe hours and hours, the source or the secret is in these logs. You just need to know some kind of a high level information, what to look for, and a bit of knowledge of custo, and uh, you should be able to good to go. For example, I mentioned a minute ago that the failure in the function is not HTTP 500. But let's say that's what's happening. I mean, it's the actually binding failure or something. But let's say that your application is returning 500 because your code found something and you need to track when it is happening and why it is happening, how you do it. So there are 2 tables here. Um, there are 2 tables. One is traces, one is requests. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these 2 tables. Traces gives you all the information, what is happening in your system. Request is request response, HTTP request response that is happening by your application. So all of that is recorded. So I'm going to join these 2 tables. I just want you to spend with me 1 minute on this query, and I'm going to hide all this information. Let me increase the font size a little bit so everybody can see that. And as you can see, look at this query. It is saying result code is not equal to 200. So we are trying to find where request was not successful. Then it is joining the request with traces with the operation ID. Operation ID is the correlation ID between your function log in traces and in request. You join these two, and then you are kind of projecting, selecting these kind of 3 columns and to find out what exactly happened. And this will give you all the information. So let's select this thing and let's run it. And this gives us all the information. So it will tell you, okay, this function was executed and it is, basically that return a non 200 error. So let's see what is happening with that. This is the same operation ID. And if we look at that, this is was programmatically called. So all that information is there. And then there is this log. So for that, uh, I mean, basically in my code, I'm just generating a superficial bug where if a random number is 10, I'm throwing an exception. Okay, or in that function, I'm catching it and logging it and returning a 500. Okay, so basically you can based on that. So your function has error, it is recorded in request, and then in the traces, if you have logged anything while the function was executing, you are just correlating that. So that's why. So important. So quick wrap up. I know we are right on time. Um, Please use the built-in tools. They are there to help you. While you're kind of troubleshooting your function, and understand that there are 3 key things: input binding, output binding, and your function code. Anything wrong with the configuration and your code can cause your function to fail. Okay. As I said before, use the built-in tools and make sure you have App Insights Azure Monitor enabled. So if you, as you are kind of doing deep dive into troubleshooting, Azure App Insights / Azure Monitor is there to help you. And with some simple queries, you can get in-depth information about what went wrong, which can save you hours and hours of sifting through your code. Okay. So with that, thank you very much. I know we ran a bit over, and I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. And see you next week for another session. Any questions? I know it's over.
No questions on the chat, maybe. Great session.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.